Hey there and welcome to another PSC Tuts spoon-fed Photoshop tutorial. I'm Gavin Steele, and in today's tutorial I'm going to be taking you through Constantine's creating a feathered crow illustration. And I'll just show you the final image that we're creating here. It's a nice dark black and white kind of image, some really nice textures going on, some cool feather effects, and playing around with some brushes and some extraction tools, and obviously playing around with this crow image. So as per usual, check out all the steps over at PSC Tuts. They're all there and all the files are linked to. All of them in today's tutorial are all free, courtesy of Stock Exchange and over at DeviantArt. Make sure you check out each of those brushes and those images. There's some really great stuff there. So make sure you check out all the other authors' other works just in case you want to find out any alternatives to the image or the images that we're using in today's tutorial. So I'm just going to quickly flick through those. Some paper, a little tear, some brilliant brushes here. Make sure you check out all the brushes over at DeviantArt, but this is a particularly pretty good collection of feathered brushes, and another one here, and then finally this final image of a red ostrich feather. Okay, so let's head back over to the tutorial and let's check it out. So we're going to be using some textured paper for the background, and we're going to grab another little bit of paper with this crack in it, and we're going to apply that to the first texture, and then we're going to bring in this image of this crow, and obviously we're going to play around with some brushes and stuff like that. So it'll hopefully be a fairly quick one, and we'll get started. So load up Photoshop. I've already got my initial bit of old paper texture in there. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to desaturate it, so that's Command-Shift-U on the keyboard, and then I'm going to head over to background, open that up, and I'm going to right click on that layer and head over to blending options. Again, you could have double clicked on that layer, and here we've got our blending options, and we're just going to do a nice gradient overlay, and we're going to set it to overlay. We're going to reduce it down to 80%. We're going to reverse it. We're going to set it so that it's radial, and the angle is going to stay on 90, and we're going to increase this to 129% scaling. And that's all we need to do with this layer, and we'll click on OK. And we'll come back a little bit later on and we'll burn some of these edges just to darken them a little bit, and the bottom bit down here as well, but that's looking pretty good. So I'm just going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see the whole canvas on the screencast. Just position all this stuff. Brilliant. Okay, next thing that we need to do is we're going to go and find our second texture, which I've got down here, and we're after this little tear or this little crack in this wallpaper, whatever it might be. So I'm just going to bring that up. We're going to grab just a quick lasso tool, and we're just going to go around this like so. I'm going to copy that image and copy that selection, come back to our original document, just going to paste it in on this top layer here. Let's just unlock that background layer. So let's just deselect that, copy that layer, paste it onto a new layer like so, and I can just drag that layer straight on. Now it's massive, so we need to bring it down, scale it right down, say 25%. Okay, even then it's a little bit too big, so let's say 10%, and that looks pretty good. And then if we hit enter, I'm going to hit Z on the keyboard, and we're going to bring up, and we're just going to zoom in just a little bit to the top of the page, use space to move around, V to grab our layer again, so we can move it around. We just want it to be at the top layer, or the top of our layer up here. So to make it blend, we're going to do Command, Shift, and U. We're going to desaturate it, and then we're just going to grab the eraser tool, add a nice feathered, reduce the hardness right down, and we're just going to blend that in. So just start to take away the edges like so. And then let's come up the top of it. Okay, that looks pretty good. So, we're pretty much finished. I'm just going to minimize that down. Let's use Z on the keyboard and Alt to zoom out. See how that looks? Yep, that looks part of that original bit of paper. So that's going to add a bit of depth and a bit of feel to the image. The next thing we need to do is grab our crow and cut it out. So here's my crow right here. You can already see I've got my marching ants going around the side of the crow. I just used the pen tool as normal, grabbed a pretty rough selection of our bird, and again I'm just going to copy that layer, create a new layer, paste it in there, and then we're going to drag that onto our new document. And again, Command T on the keyboard to scale it. We're going to lock our scale, and we're going to reduce it right down to about 20%. Looks pretty good. Okay, and by being zoomed out like this, it gives you a really good idea of where your piece is going to fit into the whole document. So once we've got that image in there, I'm just going to minimize that down. We're going to start to desaturate this image and start to play around with the color a little bit. So Z on the keyboard, just going to zoom in just a little bit. There we go, 100%. And again, use the space to move around. Okay, so the first thing we need to do with our crow layer is, let's call it crow. Okay, we're going to duplicate the layer, so Command J or Control J on your keyboard will create a copy of that layer. Desaturate it, Command Shift U, that new layer is being desaturated. We're going to set it to multiply, and then we're going to set the opacity down just a bit to 80, something like that. Okay, that looks pretty good. We're going to duplicate it one more time, so Command J again, still on multiply, this time right down to about 40-45%. And then we're going to come over to our burn tool over here, reduce the size of our brush, and we're going to darken and lighten some of these areas. Now, here's a little trick. If you're on the burn tool and you're darkening these areas up at the top, around the eyes, down the sides, down here, okay, if you hold down Alt, it'll flick. Okay, so it'll flick between the dodge and the burn tool by holding down Alt, and then we can lighten up some of these areas up the side, around the beak, and then just darken this area, let go of Alt. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so we're going to group all of those layers together, stick them into a folder, and oops, make sure they actually go in. And let's call that our crow group. Click on OK. And then we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to start to add our feathering and all that kind of stuff just around the sides and around the bottom of our image to start with. And then we're going to add some brushes just coming over the top to create the hair. So make sure you head back over to the tutorial files, and as I said before, make sure you grab all of the brushes. And once you grab those brushes, just come back to the tutorial, load them up, go to your brush tool, and if you don't see the brushes straight away down at the bottom like you can see I've got here, let's just bring them out. Then head over to your preset manager, and you should be able to load them up and find them on your desktop. So I'm just going to click on done. And with those installed, we're going to add these feathers along the top. Now before we do that, I'm just going to focus on this eye, because the eye is a little bit faded and we want it to stand out just a little bit more. It's going to be the only bit of colour on the whole image. So come back to the last layer we created, Command J, duplicate that layer. Let's create just a quick mask on that. Grab your brush tool, normal brush, round brush, and we're going to zoom in just a little bit around the eye. Back to our brush tool, and we're going to grab all of the eye area here. So I'm just painting black over the mask. So that this area here is going to come through. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come down to, if I Command select that area now and come back onto our actual layer, not the mask, and I'm going to do a hue and saturation, and we're going to increase the saturation. Oh, let's cancel that a second. It's applying to the whole image. So Command Shift I, come back, hue and saturation. There we go. So you're just playing around to get as bright a blue or as dark a blue as you want. So I'm just going to increase it to about +30. Increase the lightness just to about 8. That looks pretty good. Just a touch more saturation. Click on OK. And let's zoom out and have a look. And it stands out just that little bit more. And again, you can come back in and you can make that, you could change the color to red, green, or whatever it might be. I think nice blue. In fact, we can do it just a little bit more, 63 or something like that. And then click on OK, and now we've got a pretty cool eye effect on our crow. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a couple of groups now, underneath and above, for our feathers. And I'm going to create one below. Okay, we're going to start with the ones down at the bottom down here. Now we're just going to start to fill this area down the bottom with our feathers. So head over to the brush tool, make sure you've got black selected. You can hit D on the keyboard, that'll bring that up. And we're going to scroll right down to these new feathers, and we're going to start to add these. So I'm going to start with, let's have a look. Let's start with this 368 brush here. And inside our feathers below, we're going to create a new layer. And if I just click on that brush, you can get an idea for the size and what it's going to look like. So Control Z that, let's bring it right down, and let's just add that there. Don't worry about this area down here, we can keep that nice and black. We're going to come over these bits anyway with other feathers, and then we just keep flicking between our feathers, trying to get different results. Grab this one here, and again, if you're not happy, come over to the brush tool, and we're just going to change the brush tip, change the angle of our brush, have it pointing down maybe, out to the side. That's pretty good. Okay, and then grab a different brush, scale it right down. We're just going to play around with these brushes until we get them looking how we want them to look. So we're going to be filling this area here and then coming down towards the bottom. So we'll just hit space and just move down. We're going to be filling this area down towards the bottom. So I'm going to grab another big brush. Okay, we kind of want all the ending points to be coming out of the image rather than the other way around. Okay, looks pretty good. Ooh, not sure about that one. Okay, so again we're just building up all of these different layers of the brushes until you get an area that you're happy with. Now I'm just going to use this brush, we're just going to fill in this area down here so it's completely black, giving ourselves a bit of room. Okay, it looks pretty good. And again, there's going to be a little bit, if I just zoom in here, of a line starting to build. So this is where we're going to just move that out of the way, come up to our feathers at the top, and again create a new layer and start to build up our feathers. Now what I didn't do with the feathers below is I didn't create a new layer for each brush, which is, it's probably the best idea to do. So I'm going to select this brush now on this layer, and again just clicking, creating a nice feathered area there. Okay, let's just zoom out. Okay, so we're getting quite a nice flow to the image, and we're going to go and grab some of our other images now. So again, make sure you've got the hairy spoon image, make sure you've got your other feathers. We're going to start with this one, and we're going to learn how to extract this. So open it up in Photoshop. Okay, I've got my original here, and to extract it, all that we did was I went down to my layer, I went to select, color range, and I don't know, quick mask. Okay, let's go back in, color range, and if you just see, you can see the white is the area you're going to get and the black is the area you're not going to get. Now sometimes it works really well with images and sometimes it doesn't work too well. Click on OK, and there are a number of different ways of extracting images from. You could go around this with the pen tool, but it would take you forever with these little furry bits. There are some filters for the extract tool again, which are pretty good for taking things out. But I've just taken a pretty rough cut of my hair there, my feathers, sorry, and we're just going to take that straight into our document. So grab that layer, bring it straight in, transform it, Command T on the keyboard, down to about, let's say, 10. We're going to move that over this area here. Again, you can just start to free resize that. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to pop that in, and we're going to pop that in the below feathers folder. There we go, and it kind of fits in nicely. Alt on the keyboard, I'm just going to Command Z. Select that layer again, hold down Alt, and I'm just going to create another copy coming up the side. And so on. Okay, that looks pretty good. And let's have a look what we've got to do next. So, next thing that we need to think about is our feathers above our head and our second crow. So let's add our second crow now. I'm just going to come back to our crow layer. I'm going to drag it down to duplicate that layer. Command T and hold Shift and Alt. Bring it down, move it into place. Right click, and we're going to flip that horizontally so it's facing the other way. And I'm pretty happy with the size of that. Let's zoom in and have a look how it fits in. Yep, that's pretty good. Just zoom out. Maybe just move it up just a touch. Okay, and again you might want to go back, just grab brush tool, grab some feathers, and over the top of this just create some feathers coming in just to help it blend in with our image. Let's have a look if we zoom in. Yeah, that looks a lot better. Okay. Right, so it's all looking pretty good. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go and extract some of the other feathers, and we're going to put those over the head and coming over the beak and stuff like that, and then we're going to have the falling feathers coming around the sides. So we need to load up those images. So we've got, if I just load them all up. Okay, so we've got the spoon image to start with. Bring that onto our canvas. Okay, we're going to delete this area down the middle and we're going to try and extract just these little feathery bits around the sides. Now to do that, I'm just going to grab the eraser tool and I'm going to hit Command J just to duplicate my image a couple of times and turn some of these off so we've got some backups. And then I'm just going to come straight in. And because we're going to put this behind our image, it doesn't really matter that we're a bit rough with the edge of our spoon. We just want to get rid of the areas which are similarly coloured to the areas we want to extract. Okay, then if you bring up your levels panel, I'm just going to move that over here. We can play around with just darkening our image just a little bit, making the feathers a little bit whiter, like so. Click on OK, come over to selection and colour range, and again we're saying that we want this area here, so you can select that or select the area in here, and let me just go back, click on OK, and you can see we've got a nice selection. I'm going to come back to one of our original layers down at the bottom. I'm going to copy, create a new layer, Command V, and then turn off all these other layers, and you can see we've got, you know, quite a nice selection of those feathers. Again with the eraser tool, just make sure we missed a few bits here. Make sure you get rid of all of those. Increase the size of your brush. Okay, now we need to make this black. So what we can do is we can desaturate the image, and we can Command I to invert it, Command J to duplicate it, set that duplication to multiply, and now I've got nice black feathers. You can reduce that a little bit, Command J again, and just build up our layer, merge all of those together, Command E on the keyboard, and then drag that layer onto our document. And we're going to position that, Command T, we're going to transform it. Bring it down like so and hit enter, and then we're going to drag this right below our crow group, like so. And let's just zoom in. Let's see if we can just bring that down just a little bit. Ooh. Make sure you grab just the layer that you've brought in. Okay, just going to bring that down just a little bit. Okay, it looks pretty good. I'm going to Alt click and just create a copy and bring that down here. Command T, right click, and we're just going to warp that, and we're just going to bring it over just like so. So it's going to look like it's curving. Okay, and then hit enter. And then we're just going to move that down as well. And nudging, and again that adds a bit of depth at the hairs. You know, the feathers and the hairs are all going in slightly different directions. And that looks pretty good. Okay, let's have a quick zoom out. Okay, and the image is starting to take shape. So the next thing to do is to add our falling bits, you know, coming around the edges and so on. Let's go have a look at our final image and just see how on track we are. Yeah, that's pretty good. We've got just done our hair now, and we've already done our crow, so we're going to start to add these little feathers that are falling down around the image. So let's head back into Photoshop. And let's grab those images. I'll just resize the canvas. Okay, so again, if we just hit Command L and play around with our levels, just darken the areas on the outside, we get a nice white selection. Click on OK, and then head up to select, color range, select the white area, click on OK, come back to our original layer, copy, new layer, Command V, we can turn off these layers, and again we're going to Command Shift U to desaturate, Command I to inverse, Command J, duplicate it a couple of times, set it to a lower opacity and multiply. Okay, I'm not really happy with that selection. It doesn't look very good at all, so I'm going to do this one slightly different. Okay, let's bring down the levels again just a bit. Okay, let's Command Shift U, desaturate it now. Let's head up to Image Adjustments and Brightness and Contrast. Let's just increase the contrast a bit. And brightness. Now when we go to color, we select this area, click on OK, we should get a better selection. Come back to our original layer, copy, new layer, Command V, yeah, that looks a lot better. Erase these areas that we don't need around the sides. Command Shift U to desaturate, and then we're going to hit Command I to invert, and that's a much better selection of that inner area. So now when we duplicate it and multiply and then decrease the opacity, we get a much nicer feather, like so. Shift, grab those two layers, merge them together, drag that layer in, again Command T, link the constraints for the proportion that we're going to shrink it by, and then reduce that right down, because these are just going to be bits that are going to be falling. So we can hit enter there, you can get rid of this now, and then in fact if I before I descale it, let's just right click on it, convert it to a smart object, then let's scale it, let's reduce it by 20% to start with, and then bring it right down. Okay, now I can Alt copy that, bring it over here, flip it round, scale it right down again. Okay, and then we're going to bring in our big feather now, and we're going to apply some shadow to this one as well as it's falling, so that it looks like it's just about to hit the paper below. So again, to extract this, all that I'm going to do is I'm going to go through exactly the same process as we just did with our previous feather. In fact, why don't we just try with this one? Let's head over to, let's Command L, change our levels. Let's increase our levels. Click on OK. And okay, let's go up to filter and let's just use the extract filter and see how we get on with this, just as another method for extracting something. We're going to use the highlighter tool, and we're going to have smart highlighting, and we're just going to zoom right in and back to our brush tool, and we're just going to go along the edge like so. This is just another way a lot of people have asked me about using the extract tool, so why not? Let's see what result we get using it with this particular feather. So just racing up the edges. Like so. Okay, just decrease the size of the brush. I might have gone a little bit too small there, but we'll see. Down the sides. Okay, and we're just going to come back around the bottom, and then we're going to fill this in, and it might work for us, it might not work for us, but because this image is such a large image file size, I don't think we'll have too much of an issue with it. Could just be my selection might be a little bit thin. Okay, bring that back up. And again, if the more time you take with these selection tools, the better the selection you're going to get. But I think when you start off with such a nice size image to start with, it works in your favour, because we're going to be shrinking this down quite a bit anyway. Okay, almost there. Oops. Let's bring that right in. Finish it up. Let's zoom out, make sure we've got it all, and we're going to fill that in. Yep, that looks pretty good. Click on OK. And you can see it's done a pretty good job of just taking out those edges. And what we're going to do is command click on that area, come back to one of our original layers, turn the other one off, command C to copy that layer, create a new layer, command V, paste it in, and let's see what we've got. We've got this layer here. Command Shift U to desaturate it, command J again to duplicate it, set it to multiply, reduce the opacity down just a little bit, command J one more time. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Merge those three layers together, command E, and then we're just going to drag them straight onto our document. Command T to transform, link the scaling, let's go down to about 20, that looks pretty good. In fact, let's start with 25, let's hit enter. And we'll zoom out, just so we can see the whole of our document. You can see that feather fits in absolutely perfectly. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to convert it to a smart object, because again we're going to be repeating this around our image. And then once you've done that, let's position our first one, let's say just to the right here. And again, I'm just going to scale it just a little bit, like so. Hold down Alt, going to drag a copy of that, transform it. This one I'm going to make a little bit bigger, bring it out to the edge, maybe have it rotate just in just a little bit. Click on enter, and Alt, we're going to drag another big one up at the top here. Like so. And with that one we're going to hit up the blur, Gaussian blur, and let's set that to 3.5, something like that. Looks pretty good. Let's zoom in just a little bit. Okay. Now what we want to do is, let's come back to some of these other layers down the bottom. So V on the keyboard, I'm going to turn auto select so I grab the right layer. This one here, let's turn that off. And we're going to create lots of little ones now, all around the place. Okay, it looks pretty good. So with the layers that we've already created, I'm just going to come back to those. I'm going to create a drop shadow. To do that, I'm just going to alt click, just drag the layer down, bring it below the original, and then we're going to go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and bring that right up to about 5 or 6. Click on OK. And again, just going to nudge this down just so we get a nice, just a gap between the two, and then lower the opacity down just a touch, like so. We can start to see that that's going to look like it's just about to hit the ground. Let's grab this layer down here. Again, alt click, move the shadow down just a bit, filter, blur, Gaussian blur, click on OK, have the same settings, and again, just reduce the opacity, and let's make sure it's below the original layer, and that looks pretty good. Some of the smaller ones, again, if we go back to V and we select them, they might have a little bit of a shadow. They're just smaller feathers just about to hit the ground. So again, alt click, drag it to the bottom, move the layer below the original, filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Let's reduce that so we get a little bit more definition, and just reduce the opacity just a little bit. Okay, and then let's go back and let's grab our original, grab a copy of that. I'm going to make that nice and big. Move that about here, move that to the very top of the stack, and go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, just reduce it down. We just want to pick out some of the characteristics of the feather, but we still want it to be blurred out, and then transform it. Oops. Let's transform that. Let's flip it horizontally. Actually, vertically, my mistake. Yeah, that's pretty good. And the blur still stays applied. And let's have a look at our total image. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Just nice quick techniques there on creating and adding brushes, the final composition, all that kind of stuff. You might want to come back to your texture at the bottom, maybe grab the burn tool, dodge tool, and just darken up some of these areas down the bottom, like so, till you get a nice image like Constantine's created for us here. So hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I've been Gavin Steele, taking you through Constantine's creating a feathered crow illustration. Do check out the website and all our other video tutorials, and hope to see you back here soon. Thanks very much. Goodbye.